Hey y'all, I'm Elisa, the Scrappy Wife, and today I have a member exclusive video for you. I am working in Genesis 9 verse 12 when God gives the sign of the rainbow as a sign of his covenant with Noah and with the people of the earth. If you've been watching long, you know that I absolutely love rainbows, and of course this is one of the verses, one of the reasons behind it. And so I'd like to journal this verse today. I'm planning on doing some Neocolors, some stamping, and I'm excited to dive in. So I will put you all on fast forward. I will list everything down below just like always. Otherwise, let's go. All right, so I definitely love Jane Davenport stamps. I think they are so beautiful and so whimsical, and this is a stamp that I've used before and I will continue to use over and over again. I think this girl is just so beautiful. So I'm inking her up. I have my super large acrylic block, adding in some VersaFine Onyx Black ink so that it won't react with water. And I'm going to put her right kind of in the middle. I want her hair to kind of be underlining the verses that I am referring to in Genesis 9. So I have my beautiful stamped image, and then I'm just taking a pencil and I'll go over it with a micron pen in just a bit, and I'm extending her hair out. And my idea is that her hair is forming this rainbow feel that I'm going for on this page. This whole thought came from a conversation my kids had in the back of our minivan the other week. It had just rained and the sun was starting to come out, and we were headed, I think, to soccer practice or something like that. And one of them said, "Don't forget to look for rainbows." And then my daughter said, "Yes, the conditions are just right." And so they knew that the rainbows come after the rain. They knew like the science behind how rainbows are formed, but it made me just think of all the times that we miss looking for rainbows because we might just be looking for them in the obvious places. Like we look for the literal rainbows in the sky or rainbows of light from a prism. And I think of looking for rainbows within people and within the people that God surrounds us with. And I think God gives us little glimpses of his promises with those people. And so I wanted to put this rainbow into a person to kind of encompass that feeling of making sure we are always looking out. God's promises are always fulfilled because as soon as God says something, it is automatically true. Like there's no waiting for it to be fulfilled. It is fulfilled. We are just waiting to get to that point in time, if that makes sense. So I loved the idea of this rainbow being in this person as a reminder that we should always be looking for rainbows and not always in the typical circumstances. Once I finish tracing over the hair with the micron pen, then I definitely erase any pencil marks that are still showing, and I'm coming back over with Neocolor 2 crayons. And I picked an array of crayons in kind of a rainbow color, but not in primary colors because I don't usually like red in my Bible, and so I am going with purples and pinks instead. And I'm kind of just adding lines in at the edges of each of these hair stripes, like I'm considering them. And I'm working through my rainbow. I'm being pretty heavy-handed with the Neocolor because I want plenty of color on this page. What I love about the Neocolor is it's going to have this watercolor look. You're still going to be able to read text underneath, which I always appreciate. And even with the black lines coming through, it's not going to obstruct the text enough to block anything or anything like that. So I don't have to color in solid because once I add water to this, it will spread just like watercolor would. And so there's no need to do any solid coloring when you're working with Neocolors if you're planning on adding water. I suppose you could always just use these as soft crowns. I would be careful though that they wouldn't get wet in the future. If they accidentally got wet, like came through another page, then you might have a few issues. So adding in all my colors here, coming from a purple all the way into a dark blue, and then I'm coming back with a big brush that will hold plenty of water, and I have my towel over here you can see, and I'm just putting water over the edge, having it react, not bringing it solid. So with Neocolors, you can continue to work with the color, bringing it out, blending it until it is a very consistent covering, but I wanted it to feel a little bit shaded. So I did want those lines to be darker. And then of course I'm blending the colors in. So I'm going color to color. I'm making sure to wash off my brush in between colors so that it doesn't get too muddy. And you'll see in a bit, once I get to the blue around her face, it does get a little bit muddy, but I'm able to kind of clean that up with just a paper towel while it's still wet. So when Neocolors are wet, they are pretty easily absorbed with a paper towel. You're not going to take out all the color, but you will be able to lift up some of that muddiness, which is another thing I just love about this particular supply. So look how beautiful that looks. Her rainbow hair, I think, is just gorgeous and just so fun, so easy to do with the stamp and the Neocolor, and I'm just in love with how this image came out. Okay, once the main color is down, I am coming over it again with clean water each time. You can see I'm like rinsing off my brush in between each, going over those lines just to allow them to blend. And yes, I'm just using the corner of my paper towel right there to pick up some of the excess water so it doesn't just go all over the place. And I do decide I'm gonna start drying it, but I see that that blue drip is kind of there, and I decide I'm just gonna bring in some very clean water to kind of bring this color down, fill in this area so it fades out really nicely. Now that is dried. I used my heat tool, and now I'm coming back to her face. I'm gonna follow kind of the same idea, adding a little bit of color around the edges. I'll add some pink in her cheeks and some purple for some shadowing on her neck, just so that it's not a flat color, just gives her a little bit of dimension. And then again, coming back with that same brush, and this time I'm kind of working in a circular pattern because I do want to activate this color pretty well because I'm wanting it to really blend nicely. I was really light-handed with the purple because I didn't want it to be too much. And I realized as I was adding that I forgot to put any peach down in the neck. So I last minute add a little peach just so it will blend nicely down there. And once that's all in place, I do dry that really well. And then I'm coming back over the top with some Prismacolor colored pencils. Now I use the colored pencils just to add a little bit more really fine point shading. So I wanted to add a little bit of color to her lips. I'm careful not to color it in solid though. I do leave a little white so that there's a highlight. I'm adding a little bit of blue to her eyes and then some purple as eyeshadow just to give her a little bit of character, because I'm pretty sure if you have rainbow hair, you're probably wearing some makeup. And then I added just a little bit more shading under her neck, and that should pretty much do it for this girl. Now I just have to add some different journaling. The title for this page is going to be Look for Rainbows. And of course, I couldn't have rainbows just be a regular word. So I am going to do some hand lettering, and then I'm bringing back out my Neocolor crayons. And so what I do sometimes, if I know I can't erase the pencil all the way, like I'm going to put something over the top, I erase really lightly, so there's barely any pencil showing, but I can still see my lines there. I just don't trust my own judgment as far as spacing. I think I would do like a huge word that would go all over the text, and that's not what I wanted, so I always have to draw it in pencil first. All right, now I'm tracing over my super light erased pencil marks with the different Neocolors that I used in her hair. And so it looks like crayon right now, but what I will do is again come over it with a water brush this time. This time a really fine tipped water brush. And you can have the same effect by doing hand lettering with watercolor, just with watercolor. That's Amy Tangerine does that all of the time. Just hand letters straight up with watercolor, and I think it is so gorgeous. I don't really trust myself with that. I prefer to do it with Neocolors just so that I can make sure everything is where I want it to be. I don't feel like I have enough control when I'm using watercolor. That's probably a control issue, and I'll have to work through that. But Neocolors kind of give you the same effect where the colors are blending into each other. They probably don't blend quite as smoothly as straight up watercolor, but that's okay. For this page, they definitely are giving me the effect that I'm going for. So a really fine tip brush. I am constantly wiping it off over on my towel just so I don't mix the colors too much, like accidentally drag a blue into a yellow, because that's not what I'm wanting. And now I'm just going over that area really carefully and making sure those colors are blended one into the next in more of a seamless fashion. I love how this came out. This is a technique I need to practice a little bit more. I would love to use multiple colors in my titles. I feel like most of the time I default to black, which is very impactful and I love it. But using color sometime could be a lot of fun as well. Once I finish up with this word, then I'm just going to use a stamp for the top of this title. So again, the title is going to be Look for Rainbows. I'm going to use the inky little stamp set from By the Well for God to stamp out Look For. It fits perfectly in that area, and I like still the handwritten look of it because I think it matches pretty well with how I wrote out rainbows. So stamping that out, and then I'll take my attention to the bottom of the page. Just as a reminder, the verses I'm looking at start in Genesis 9:12, where it says, "And God said, this is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life." I am using my new stencil from Archer and Olive to add lines, and you guys, I was a little bit disappointed. Those long lines, the plastic was too flimsy for it to really work as a strong stencil. When you pressed down, it moved, and so those lines are not totally straight, which of course in the grand scheme of things not a big deal, but I was a little bit sad that the stencil didn't quite work like I thought it would. I think the lines that are shorter will work really well in my memory keeping, in my memory planner, but I don't know about these long lines. I'll have to experiment to see how I can get them to stay straight. So I did a little bit of journaling, decided I wanted to do some more, so I'm pulling out my stencil a second time, adding some more in there, and then finishing out this page with an amen and a date stamp. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you again for all of your support. I just love our little Scrappy YouTube community. I'm so excited to hear from you guys, to see your sweet comments. They really mean so much to me. I always love reading them and responding to them. I will list everything that I use down below. The best place to pick up Neocolors individually is at By the Well for God. You can buy individual colors. You can also buy full sets on Amazon, so make sure to check those out. All right, as I'm wrapping it up, I hope that you all have a fabulous day, and as always, keep it creative.